Well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited and honored to have Sam, GreenerSideofSam, and Holly with me today on the OG Rose Spotify podcast. So we are just so happy because not only are we getting to talk, but we are also together physically in the same place. So it's just, my heart is so overflowing with joy and excitement. So yeah, I just thought we'd get together and talk together in person about a myriad of topics that have been coming up organically in conversation anyway. But I think it's really fascinating to think about the different ways we may consider or we may relate to terms like productivity versus creativity, and how those two things are kind of very much related, but also different. And sometimes, depending on a certain dynamic of market in one's country or whatever, there can be certain ways in which some get emphasized more than others, or some get kind of like stigmatized or whatever. So I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about that and how those things might differ in terms of how we relate to that. I also just personally love talking about this from a education standpoint, or like school standpoint, institutional standpoint. So I'll definitely probably dive into it from that place as well. But yeah, I'll just kind of throw it out there, very general and big. But I'm also going to put in the description links to these wonderful ladies' works so you can find out more about what they do.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, we're very happy to be here. It's been a wonderful, inspiring week.
Oh, yeah. Well, for me
lots
as well,
of discussions, lots of midnight discussions,
lots of polarity.
Some discussions more terrifying than others.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Daniel may be broken right now.
Yeah, we're still.
He'll recover.
We'll change his batteries later, and we'll see if he can do a hard reset on him.
Get some human there. And
yeah, right. Exactly.
But one discussion that came up was talking about productivity versus creativity, and how women, because of our cycles, we work a lot better on a creative structure, and it looks a lot differently from your typical 9 to 5. Like I know personally for me, for 2 weeks, I could work 12 hours a day straight, sometimes 15 hours, and I'm super, super productive. And then the other 2 weeks, I kind of go into myself and I think and I reflect a lot about things. And there's a lot of preparation that goes on before that kind of resetting where I'm working a ton again.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting about like just how I do think there's definitely more of the feminine energy that's aligned with the moon and the lunar cycles, and then there's something that I kind of connect with masculine with the sun, the solar energy and the solar pattern. And the solar is always, it's kind of very, very consistent and daily, and sort of there seems to be a much more regular thing with the sun, because the moon is so fascinating. You'll look up and it'll be like, whoa, it's in a completely different spot, or it looks completely different today or tonight, and it's just it's wild. And it will show up twice in a day, like it'll be here, and then you're like, oh, it's back over here again, and
you'll just catch it randomly during the day, whereas the sun is just it rises, it is there, it sets.
It just does its part every day, and there, that beautiful kind of correlation and relationship between the solar and the lunar is so fundamental and huge for like our ecosystem and the way the world works. It's mind-boggling, really, but it is fascinating to think about that from the energy level and the way in which we operate, where something you've said, Holly, is like the idea of being able to work as you feel, as you need to, basically, instead of being stuck into like this paradigm of I need to do it all from these hours, like the 9 to 5, or this, I'm going to be, there's a lot of sometimes the productivity culture that can be also a lot of, I want to say surveillance in a way, like making sure you're doing your thing, making sure you're getting it done, which sounds great, it has a good intention, but unintentionally it can completely, unfortunately, affect the atmosphere for when you would actually be most productive, when you're like let go to do it on your own, at your own pace. So yeah.
And I was bringing that up just because I've never been a very noticeably hormonal person, I guess I would say, because I mean, obviously it's in there somewhere, but it's not something I feel very in touch with or like very controlled by in any way. But that being said, I do think that there's that feminine energy, whether you feel that hormonal cycle or not, where you will be affected by the motions of the day, the moon phases and stuff like that, because we are creatures made of much water. So when people say, oh, energy changes around the full moon, and a lot of people sort of look at that as woo-woo, there is a scientific backing behind that, because your body and your brain are being affected by that. And I do think just inherently, you know, men and women work in very different ways. Yeah. And for women, we do have a more fluid and creative way where it's more comfortable. It's easier for men to lock into that. I'm here at 9, I work until 5. Whereas women, you know, we might work through the whole day and get the same amount done, but we want to do it in that fluid way where we're sort of doing other things and as like, okay, I feel this right now, and then I feel like this, and I feel this energy, and you move around a lot. It's again, like more fluid. And for me, I work better with a female manager who I have right now, which is excellent, because even though we don't address it, I know there's that understanding there of she doesn't micromanage. She will just sort of set me off, and she knows that I'm going to get the work in. It's just, you know, it might be different than my male coworkers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I was thinking a little bit about that idea of this sort of, I'm trying to think a little bit more about this, but there is, I want to say there's a little bit more of a sense of the multiplicity with the moon. Like multitasking is often associated with women in the sense that we can, and this is not, you know, obviously there are some men who might be more feminine or some women who might be more masculine. These are just kind of...
There are always exceptions.
Of course. But there is something about the multitasking of women where there's a sense of actually being able to have this harmonization of doing a couple of things at the same time. And instead of where the solar or the masculine energy is a lot more kind of laser focused, let's just get all that done right now, and anything kind of popping up or coming on the sides or floating in, we might weave it. And for men, there's more of the masculine, maybe more like a bit more compartmentalized, right? It's like we're doing this and then we're doing that, and those two different approaches are wonderful because we need both. But I think to have the expectation of the compartmentalizing can be quite it's a negative thing in the sense that it can be, when we use that as the standard of productivity, then we unintentionally undercut productivity in the very effort to create it or like foster it. So
and I'm going back to the weaving too. I feel like it's a very intuitive thing that we don't necessarily think about. It's just something that we do, and actually create or being more creative or being more productive in this creative way, it actually gives an avenue to give more meaningful work, or work that I remember Daniel was talking about how women will sit down and be like, you know, I could do this for 30 hours, but it's not going to get anything done. So
you start that essay where you very quickly realize, what is this actually? What's the point of this actually going to be? And you might spy that well in advance, but men may just sit down and say, no, I've decided to do this, so I am locked in, and it doesn't matter what the outcome is. I am doing this.
Right. So there's this intuitiveness with the cycle of the moon. How we were saying how it's in different spots sometimes. It's sometimes full, sometimes a half moon, and it does what it needs when it needs to do it, and it just it's an intuition thing where the sun is just kind of obsessively going rising and setting and rising and setting, and I think those two together are such a beautiful thing.
I think that acknowledging them is really important, and it can be hard to, because again, you said, you know, we don't talk about this. It's just something you do naturally. But if you start thinking about it, and especially, you know, if you're someone who has a partner who is the, you know, of the other sex, you can work with them better by acknowledging this, because I will notice with, you know, Pei and I, we both work very hard. But sometimes I will come at him and sort of say, here's like 5 other things I need you to sprinkle in throughout your day. And for me, that is a very easy thing, because I would go, oh yeah, so I'm on this one track, and I'm gonna bring this in and this in and this, and I'll get it all done. Whereas for him, it's like, what have you just put upon me? Like I had this plan. Like, I had a plan. Why are you coming in here and telling me these different things that I now have to try and work into my plan when I don't want to think about those right now? And I can tell that, right?
Oh my gosh, that resonates so strongly. Yeah, where I'll be like bringing up,
Yeah.
you know, I'll bring up all the things, and Daniel's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Let's just finish one thing at a time. Okay.
But I got up and I figured out the 35 things we needed to do today, and now we have to do them.
But if we do a little bit here and a little bit here
And
and,
it'll be
a little bit there, we'll get it all done and even more done than we originally planned in the first place.
And it'll all be different things too, because you'll be like, oh, here's the social thing, and here's the work thing, and he'll be like, no, but this was my work day. Tomorrow is my email day. I'm like, no, you do all of it all at once.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I love that. Like, I've never thought about this, and like that how true this dynamic is, and why it might be that way. And I've just sort of, you know, thought to myself, oh, I'm like, and it's nothing that has ever been put on me as a judgment, but my own self criticism can come out where I'm like, I'm just scattered.
Yeah, I put on myself feel that way sometimes. Why am I doing 500 different things right now?
Yeah. And it's like, oh, maybe maybe instead of thinking about it in terms of scattered, I could think about it in terms of I'm trying to weave right now. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to gather, you know. And so anyways,
yeah, I like that.
I just took on like a little side job to make some extra money, and I love it because it's one of those jobs where I don't have to call anybody. It's just like on the computer, and it's not coding, but it's kind of similar to that, so that when my kids are talking to me constantly, I can work at the same time, and it's amazing.
Right, it's like a mindless task you need to do here, but then you can take the other periphery stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then I think too, like that, this sense of let's. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. With the 75 things or in the day or whatever, 35 things we want to make sure we do. Like for me, it's a big part of it is I want to say it so that it's almost, I don't know if it's like, I don't mean it to be selfish, but I'm like, I want to remember this stuff. So selfishly, I just want to say it out loud so that this is kind of like, hey, let's put this on our
it sort of helps manifest it, for lack of a better word. Like, okay, I'm vocalizing this today. So I've put it out there. Now I have to do it.
Yeah. But I think there is something where, and golly, this actually is a topic that I've been thinking a lot about. Hopefully we'll do some reflective writing on it, but on verbal processing, because I think there is a way in which I find that might be considered a type of verbal processing, where you're just saying, I'm talking through all the things. And for that masculine sort of solar perspective, it's like we're here, and then we'll be there when we're there. We're not even there. You know,
it's like I need to know what I'm doing getting up to there.
It's so funny because I'll list off, okay, this weekend we need to do this and this and this and this and this, and then my husband's like, it's okay, honey. Calm down. Take a bath. We'll do it later.
It's like, no, but if I don't do this, I'm gonna feel worse.
Right. It has to get and another thing, because this is so intuitive, when we need to do something, it needs to be done now.
Yeah.
Like right now.
It's like this has come up into my mind now, so this is when I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. One time I came to David, and I was like, honey, I need you to mow the grass right now. And he's like, I'll just do it on Sunday. What are you talking about? And I was like, honey, it's going to rain. And it wasn't cloudy out.
Yeah.
And I was like, honey, it's going to rain. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll do, or I guess I'll mow. I guess I'll do it now, honey. And I was like, okay, thank you. And sure enough, it rains. I just knew.
I think we're keeping so many other factors in our head, right? And again, like I want to speak to the positives of both ways of thinking, because I there are many times where I wish I could just laser focus in on one thing, because it's very difficult to do that, and I think that's amazing, and you can get so much done that way.
Yes.
But there will be this thing, and if you think of it like a cue, like something that's cueing, right? We have a million different factors that, like, okay, well, this is going to come up, so this needs to be here in the queue. Whereas I think the male mind a lot of the time will say, I have this in the queue. Anything else that comes up is now going to just appear in the queue without necessarily the influence of outside factors. Where it's just like you have that straightforward queue that this is the order it's appearing in. So we might be saying, here's this thing because I just figured out like it's gonna rain, so you need to move this up in the queue. And it's like, well, no, this is coming in at number 10. I don't want to move it up to number 2.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I absolutely love what we figured out for road trips. So I'm the multitasker, I'm the snacker, the GPS, all that. And I call myself a passenger princess. And then David oh my gosh, this is amazing. He just focuses in and drives 14 hours.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I drive 2 hours and I'm like, I feel like I need to fall asleep.
You're like, I'm done.
This is good for me. So that's another really good example of focusing and multitasking that works so well together.
No, that's so good. And yeah, I think too, like what I've learned from the whole let me bring all this stuff up now is to respect that difference and sort of be able to be like, okay, what I'm going to do instead is maybe write it out for myself. Like, here's the things I need to make sure I keep a mental check of. And honestly, I could maybe even email that to Daniel. It's much better that way than me coming and just verbalizing it out.
I've done that before when we were living together. I mean, I'm nomadic right now, but I at first thought that this would be kind of like nitpicky and annoying to give like a list, but then I realized, no, this is okay because we've sort of established that I'm not trying to be annoying. I'm just trying to let you in on what's going on. So I would take a sticky note and I would write everything down and I would come in and I would very cautiously just say like, so here's what I'm thinking. Here's what we need to get done. Yeah. You know, no pressure. This is just what's going on today. And he, you know, look up from his book, like, okay. And then I go and do my stuff. But yeah, like writing that down can be a really good way of communicating rather than just coming in and being like, blah, blah, blah.
100%, because it's so it's wild how different it can be. Like sometimes, like and Sam, you'll talk a lot about like you want to resurrect the letter writing, you know, like letter writing between people. And
I love that.
There's truly something about letter writing that I think we really should like practice more or learn from. And also letter writing came up in what we were talking about, just about
conflict
and communication and stuff like that, where it can be such a great tool for you and for both people, your partner and you, your husband and you, to be able to like write it down. And instead of it, because what's so challenging, I think, for me and in the sense of verbalizing is it's hard not to see a person's facial expression or reaction, and it's nothing bad, you know, but it's still like,
but it adjusts what you're saying.
And then you're kind of
puts you off track a little bit.
And it can also be like they're just, again, this kind of like solar masculine energy of I'm focused right now to do this task, and that's an incredible laser focus ability, which I too sometimes are like, channel it, Michelle.
Find the masculine. I need to find my masculine energy today.
100%.
Gotta zone in.
100%. And so I realized that when I'm there and I'm interpreting it as like the focus face as, oh, you don't like that, or you don't want to do that. I was like, no, it has nothing to do with that at all. He's literally just trying to focus right now, and you're kind of sporadically coming in and mentioning a bunch of different things that now he's like, I will think about that, but not right now. Not right now. I'll finish this, and then we can think about that, or then we can address that. So I think that for me, it's a good, healthy learning process of saying, you know, there's such a beautiful, amazing place for just writing stuff down, sending an email. This has nothing to do with the fact that there's no place for emotions, but let's have those emotions in the right place in the right time. Let's not have it during the peak of that, the good productivity that the masculine energy has a great ability to do. Just let that be. Let it do what it needs to do, and do like have that ability to say that actually works a lot better. And I think today there's such an emphasis on, well, I just, you know, and I get it. We should absolutely learn more about like what our own personal communication styles are and what we gravitate towards or whatever. But if I wanted to be like kind of stubborn or obstinate about it, I could be like, well, this is just the way I like talking about what we need to get done. I'm just a verbal processor, which in a way that is a part of maybe what I gravitate toward doing, but I find that there are people and other contexts and other times in the day with the masculine solar energy man to be able to do that, and it's perfectly okay. It's not that, I think we can see this in such totalizing terms, like I can never do that, or I can always do that. And I think that it's really important to learn that what is actually working well, like what's functional for you both, instead of it being like, well, getting it being a invented power dynamic or a power struggle. It's like, no, or you're not like, it's just important to learn that, because if we get into this kind of like, what's my personality, or that's just what I do, then we never make any like progress with each other and improvement in terms of our functionality. So yeah, that was a lot, but yeah.
Well, I find that there's this problem with development right now where people sort of get to a certain point with it where people right now like really want to find out about themselves. You see this, micro labeling on social media and stuff, like to the point where it's ridiculous. Like you don't have a personality anymore. You are a list of things. You're a list of emojis, and it's like, this is me, and you just present that, and that's you. And what I think has come with that, and I started seeing it like at first in the MySpace days back with where everyone was very edgy. You would have this thing where they would develop up to a point where they'll say, this is how I am. But then rather than saying, and often you'll see it with faults too. Like, I'm trying to think of an example, like, I don't know, someone will just say like, oh, I'm very erratic in a certain way, but they'll take I'm just a jerk to people when they do this to me. I think you know what I mean. You've probably seen it online where they'll say, well, I'm just a jerk like this. And it's like, okay, so you've gotten to that point where you've acknowledged this.
Right.
And that's good. But you shouldn't stop there. And I think that's when you start butting heads with things, when you acknowledge the differences, but then you miss that point where you learn how to make them work together. And just like acknowledging a fault in your personality, you shouldn't just acknowledge it and then own it. You should acknowledge it and sort of own that it's a part of you, and maybe not vilify it, but then say, okay, how do I work on this to be better? Because this is probably going to impede my life in some way if I'm a jerk to certain people when they say something to me, like you can't just stop with the acknowledging of what's going on with yourself. You have to then move on from there.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, and I know another like fault that I have is I'll tend to like beat around the bush and not say something as it is. and so but because the way that a lot of women communicate, we read each other. We read each other so well. Like if I said,
and you'll have men say, "I can't read your mind."
Can you grab that like red thing over there? And the other woman is just like, yeah, I'll go grab it.
Or you'll even just look at each other and make eye contact, and you know exactly what you're thinking.
If you're in danger or something, like if a guy is hitting on you and you just like look at another female, she knows to come over and help you.
Yes.
And so I think we get into that mode of speaking, and it's like, no, men don't quite understand it unless it's like, this is this.
Yeah, and I think like there are some men who are like, they have a very that they have that capacity somehow. They've either cultivated it, or they're just kind of naturally have that sort of feminine intuition of like just seeing like, hey, are you okay? Like, do you need something? Like, but it's not always there, and that's okay too. And sort of just, instead of just kind of like wishing and hoping, like I do think there's something where somebody might from an outside perspective be like, well, isn't that contradictory? Like, let's accept the differences, but if you know you can improve, then you should improve. Right. So it's like, but that's the thing. I think it's a really interesting tension, and this is where we get a very slippery, how do I put this? There's a very, very deceiving counterfeit for this idea of the paradox of accepting, but then also not accepting certain things. I'm not just going to accept forever being a jerk to this person because they honked at me. I don't know, just whatever.
You can also accept in a certain way, but not accept. You can say, this is a part of me, this is, my demon that I'm working with, and I'm not going to hate myself, because you can look at something that you don't like within yourself and hate yourself for it, and I don't think that that's healthy. No. So you can accept it and live with it and learn that it's a part of you, but also learn to work with that and within society to better yourself in that way, I think. And they go hand in hand, the acceptance and the change.
That's such a good point. Well, because also too, like, if it's like, oh, I'm fighting this particular demon, for example, let's just use that language. It's like, well, you also don't know what to work on in yourself if you don't accept that there's something there that I need to work on, or I need to, there's whatever it is, I need to sort of be able to acknowledge it actually, like, if I just pretend it's not there, or I don't want to look at that, because it's so hard to sometimes look in those depths and into ourselves, but doing that is so important, because it kind of reminds me of a great book called Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert A. Johnson, and he's a Jungian analyst, but a really, really, really short, amazing book. I mean, if I feel like for me, reading it and really taking it seriously meant like I have to actually do something with what I just read. I can't just keep pretending certain things and ignoring certain things. It's like, go ahead, open the closets, get the skeletons out. Like, it's okay. Like, just, you need to do that, because if you don't, what happens is a complete overcompensation for never ever addressing it, never ever even acknowledging it or accepting that it's there. The accepting is that key part, but you don't just stay at the accepting in the sense of like, I'm never going to actually do the scary hard work of bringing it out, of like looking at it or working through it in my art, you know? So it's like that accepting and then the not accepting. I love that way you said that. That's so true. And I don't know if today we have kind of I don't know if it's just a one-sidedness where it's like we either just don't accept or just accept, or something about that, or sort of not acknowledging. Like, for me, what I love about the body, the earth, the nature is like we can all kind of see the sun coming up and down, right? We can all see the moon and its phases. So it's really helpful for me to understand that, yes, we're not the sun and the moon, but we are the fabric of this. Like, we are nature too, and we're part of nature too. So
a lot of society has lost sight of that.
Oh my gosh,
in a very big way.
Yeah, and so it's kind of at the place where it's almost like we can't say that we have these sort of definitive things about us. It's like, no, well, we see the definitive things about nature. Why we need to be able to acknowledge those certain things about ourselves too. As the masculine energy, as the feminine energy. So yeah, anyways, there's a lot there, but I think that's such a fundamental and key paradox, the accepting and not accepting.
And it also gets into another thing that we've been talking about, and it's interesting how this all flows, where about, you know, order and chaos, and having order in your life to have chaos in your art. A lot of people don't want to look at those inherent things in our sex, in our gender, because they think that that's some sort of blockage, you know, like, oh, I can't be creative, I can't be myself if I acknowledge that there are these things in me as a woman, or these things in me as a man, and it's blocking me. There's a gate that's stopping me from doing what I want to do and being creative and fully myself, when that's not the case. We can acknowledge these things because they're nature, they're biological, and then we can be creative within that, because you're empowered when you understand yourself and what makes you, and that gives you more freedom, those borders.
Oh my gosh, yes. This makes me like, this topic it just energizes me so much. So I think it's so important. But it's also, like I was talking about, this kind of very deceptive counterfeit. Don't people feel like they are trying to know themselves with the micro-labeling? They're like, like I'm getting an awareness about myself because I've got all these micro-labels, and
then
I know,
they don't necessarily know what to do with that.
Right. Such a good point. Such a good point. And that's too where it's like, you also have to remember that language is a type of it's a type of construction. It's a type of somebody decides what that term has underneath of it, you know. So whereas nature has laws, it's like these big kind of just, you drop an apple and it's going to fall. Like, these things are just built in the fabric of reality. And so what I think can be tricky is, like you're saying, there's something about the directionality of those awarenesses, or of those identifications, that it's like it's almost like it stops just at the language or something. Like it doesn't know where it's going or why it is that way or what it's.
Well, and I think at that point it looks more to community than the individual, because once you've defined yourself as vegan, then you've said, I'm part of this community, and that's sort of where it ends. And and a lot of people allow the community to speak for them, which I think is very unhealthy.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And I also believe that in order to kind of make it flow again, you have to address it in a very indirect way. And actually, to go back to like the masculine communicating with the feminine, one thing that I ended up doing, which works really well, is I have a huge whiteboard in our dining room. And so I do our daily activities, our weekly activities, our monthly activities, and it's sitting right across from him. So he sees it every single day. So
I had it in our kitchen right by the fridge, and I said, look at that. I was like,
so it is like me verbalizing it, but it is in a very indirect way, that he doesn't feel like I'm coming at him.
He can look at it when he wants to, when it comes up in the queue.
And I think that indirectness is a form of creativity within that constructiveness, like we were saying.
Yeah. That's really good. And actually, it's good. I wanted to bring up one more thing on this whole idea of like writing things down or emailing somebody versus just talking, because Danielle and I did this, I forget I guess we just did a recording and uploaded it to YouTube, but we were talking a lot about like the concept of comparing the oral tradition to the written tradition today. And there's something about the voice that is so parallel or compatible, or it has a quality of like spirit, right? It's very powerful. Basically, words are very powerful, our voices are very powerful, so we really, really should see it. Like Daniel was saying, I feel like he said it a couple times this week, where like we forget that like love is dangerous or something like that. So what we think of it only in terms of like empowerment, and don't get me wrong, there is a place and a very necessary place for understanding our own voices, for being empowered, for being able to use them. But we also need to know how not to use them in certain ways. And when to be mindful about that, and actually when it would benefit us to, and this is all over like the Eastern traditions about silence, about like listening, like listen more than you speak, and all of these things. So, what do they say? You get 2 ears with 1 mouth. There's a reason for that kind of concept.
Yeah, I like that.
I love that too. Yeah. So I'm not trying to say that people should be like silent. It's about understanding when to speak, when not to speak, and because then your voice will have more power. Actually, like if I'm just rattling off like all the time, like just idly about whatever, just sort of chit chatter, blah blah blah, like that, I'm not really actually giving the power of my voice like the proper place, and it can possibly like lose power. I think of the voice as fire, and it's like you need to be able to give, there is a time and a place to have the roaring bonfire, right? But you also don't just want to be like, like think about is it Yoshi with his little fireballs? I don't know. I mean, he got the fire flower, but like just little fireballs all over the place. It's like, stop, don't do that. Use it. But what's so cool about writing stuff out is that it's almost like the wick to the candle or something like that. Put the fire there, let it be there, and it still will provide the light and give the voice. But it also it's quite literally flat on paper, or like on a screen, it's flat. So it's like there's no intonation. And that can be very challenging in messaging, especially when it is the kind of sort of chit-chatter or back and forth, or then it's banter and it's play, but then is somebody offended suddenly because you're joking and we were joking, but now so it's all of that confusing stuff. But the point of the matter is like writing stuff down, actually there can be a really helpful thing in letting that voice like not be part of the exchange of information, because the voicing it can get you're just trying to light a couple candles while you bring stuff up, but what can unintentionally happen is like, ooh, it's getting hot in here. Like, it's, well, you set stuff on fire, and that person starts to set stuff on fire where somebody's like, all these like little squabbles or miscommunications could have been completely resolved had we picked a cooler medium. Like, McLuhan will talk about the hot mediums and the cold mediums, and I sometimes get confused on which, but I'm pretty sure that like the writing is a cold medium, just because you have to do a bit more work to read it. You don't just sit there and like have it fall on you. So, but anyways, the point of the matter is like understanding the voice is powerful also means understanding, training it so that we can use it in the right ways, and then allow ourselves to use other mediums, which in our literate and like literacy world, we can use that now as a tool to kind of actually make it more about like an information exchange, instead of a more like when the voice comes in, that's where like your emotions can come in, your intonations can come in, the inflections and all of that, which can become suddenly you get defensive, or the moralizations come in, and it's like there's a place for that, there's a very healthy and wonderful place for that, but it's not always necessary to get into that mode when you're just trying to ask if they want to do dinner at X time, you know what I'm saying?
and sometimes it is very difficult to articulate the things we are trying to articulate, because especially if it's within our everydayness and we don't think about it, it a good example of this is if I go away for the weekend, David's like, can you give me that recipe that you do? And I'm like, what recipe? Because when I cook every day, it's all in my head all the time, and I don't really think about it. So when I have to actually sit there and think about, how much salt did I actually put in there? It's really difficult for me to articulate it because I'm just so used to that flow of water rather than the single flame.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. And but then if you were to actually write down all this stuff, that could be overwhelming.
Yes.
So there's even a risk with like the how much are you writing to them and like how much are you and sometimes I'm just like, I guess I should just give the basics and then because one time I was so silly. I was like writing down like good night stuff and I was like, make sure this is like just like very detailed things like kids sometimes will do very habitually or every day. And so then I'm like, oh wow, like the post-it note it looked like one of those like little sheets you bring into your like your test or something where you like packed in every single thing you possibly could.
It's a formula sheet because I've tried to do the exercise sometimes of writing down everything that I do during the day, like actually everything, to try and hone in and figure how I can work in a smarter way. And it is so difficult. It is so difficult because I'll finish a day and at the end, the conclusion is, I got up, I did my yoga, I worked my day job, and at the end of the day, I did some reading, and I worked on my writing, and I, did the Stygian stuff, and sort of made some plans for my personal YouTube channel. And that in itself is still, full, right? But once you start diving into actually, like, every 5 minutes, every 10, every, half hour in that day, it expands to a million things that are almost impossible to write down. And it's just, and you don't even notice that until you do that exercise of examining it, because so often we wind up just summarizing at the end of the day or summarizing something, and it's just, it's overwhelming. So when you actually sit down to say, oh, I want to write this stuff about good night, like on a normal day, you might just think it's one thing, but it's actually 20 things.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. That's such a good point and so fascinating. And I think, part of it where if you're going to communicate, like, I don't know, a lot of also with partnership is also like being able to feel comfortable, like passing the baton back and forth, where there's an element of trust where it's like, okay, I guess you're doing it, so it might be a little different.
And it's like, that's okay.
It's okay. Exactly. And like,
so I do have trouble with it. My mom has trouble with that. My mom would sort of get herself into doing all the cleaning when I was growing up, because if my dad would come down, this is a great example of everything we've been talking about. He would be in his zone, and then at a certain time during the day, he would come down and interrupt my mom's flow by saying, oh, let me just clean the counter. And she was like, that's not what's happening right now. And he would say, well, okay, fine, I guess I can't do anything. I guess I can't help you. And go back upstairs. And she just would do all the cleaning because she just wanted it to be that exact, perfect, detailed way that she did it. And I've gotten into that myself, and I have to stop myself and say, no, you're creating more work for yourself because you're not, trusting the person that you're with.
I will say
such a good example.
One beautiful thing that I've seen in a lot of men is that if there is like a big crisis that's going on in the household, they will just zone in and get it done.
I've seen Daniel do that like 10 times a day.
Yes.
Every time we'll be in a conversation and you'll hear off in the distance, and you just see him. And he's there.
He lines it to the
or like how he went out yesterday and he's like, it's fine, I've got the kids.
Yeah.
Like I've got it. I've got it.
And I'm gonna put the car here so that you can make a quick getaway.
Yes, so things like that. And I think that's such a beautiful dynamic because we do a lot of like the invisible things that you don't really think about but need to get done. And then men will do a lot of the things that are visible, but it may seem like it's less during the day, but it can
have a large impact.
Large impact.
Yeah, and this actually reminds me a lot of another conversation Daniel and I had one time. I think we did do this as an OG Rose conversation, but it was we talked about this distinction between demand and pressure, where we were talking about the different ways in which people feel like the weight of their responsibilities and what that means for it to be something they have to take care of. But we were talking specifically in our particular situation of like, motherhood, running the home, but also he's also running the home, but he's also doing these work and big, I think that we had, I'm trying to think about which word went in which direction. I want to say pressure went with the masculine. I want to say, and the demand went with the woman, where because children, it's just think about like on-demand breastfeeding or something. Like there's a demand where it's just a constant kind of, it's like here's a demand for this or that and the other, and it's not. Demand's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to learn how to work with and to have to meet. Like it's just a demand you have to meet. But the pressure is on the. There's a lot for the masculine that I think can sometimes be. It's a little bit like Atlas, right? Like where there's a sense of like it's a lot of pressure. Nobody can help me do this. Like I have to make this very big decision, and I will certainly get input from my wife or my partner, but like I ultimately will have to make this decision, and it's kind of big. And so we talked about that. We talked about the pressure of like when you do a thing, and I think especially creatives and entrepreneurs know about this, where you're the one. Nobody else can do it for you, so now you're like, I have to do this. I have to figure out how to do this. And it's, but you get stronger and you learn how to do that and not be constantly stressed or paranoid, So we were talking about this interesting demand, because for mothers, it's a lot like if a friend comes over, it's like, hey, could you hold the baby? Or do you mind just like giving the kid an apple? Like if they're asking for this, I'm doing this right now. And so there's a lot more of a type of, it's very, it's the multiplicity, right? Like I was saying, again, back to the moon and the lunar phases and stuff. There's that multiplicity, but somebody could come in and possibly shoulder it with you. So then if nobody is, you feel a little bit more like, well, look, guys, like anyone can just hand a kid an apple, like they're asking for, like whereas for that masculine perspective, is like I can't ask anyone to be into that. So there's a unique kind of frustration of I have no other options for that, and that's like the sun, right? Like. Gee willikers, our Earth relies on the sun and its solar energy and what it does in the right timing, so we don't either freeze to death or explode to death. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So and I mean we rely on the moon too for other really important things as well, especially with the tides and the ocean and the water life. But it's just. It's different, and I think those frustrations that are typical for the men and women, kind of like, oh, you don't understand, is like, well, we just need to first acknowledge and really meditate and think on the differences. Why would it maybe feel this way for that person and for this person this way? And then that can diffuse those frustrations, like, wow, like we're really both doing our best and we're doing great, actually. Yeah. Yes, we may have these times, but we can talk now better about it.
And those energies are really made to work together.
Yeah. I think so too.
Not necessarily be at odds, although they can definitely be at odds because they can be so different. But I think we need to recognize more the differences between men and women and how that can work together, because I mean we also talked, and I mean we're getting on here, but another thing we talked about was the sort of failure of the hashtag girl boss era.
I was so hoping this would come up. I'm like, please, I hope this comes up.
Well, because and I've definitely identified that with that as I got more into work when I was younger, in my early 20s. Like I read the Girl Boss book and all of that, but that whole thing has largely shoved women into a masculine role, and where you're trying to work in a more masculine way, and that doesn't necessarily work, and women can be just as strong and productive, and even more so, like you can do all of your own driven stuff, but you can do that while acknowledging your differences and not trying to be a man, because that sort of leads to disaster.
Absolutely. 100%. I actually feel like the only time I can really get in my masculine and zone in on things is when everybody else is asleep. Because it's that time when I'm finally alone. And there is no community at that point. Yes.
And there's no one else that you might be thinking about. Like, how we said that you're thinking about all the other things, that multiplicity kind of fades, right? It's like it's all resting now, and now it's almost like it's like it's time for your focus to sort of shine in the sun kind of metaphor. So that's really interesting. I can definitely resonate with that. And I think too, like I was thinking about the girl boss hashtag, and I mean I guess in a sense it's meant to, maybe a specific question for you, Holly, like in first kind of hearing about the term, and like you read the book and like you're kind of vibing with it, but then what was it for you that kind of made this shift in perspective toward that?
Like, are you toward that for
like
initially or away from it?
Away from it, yeah.
Okay. Well,
actually, and toward it. I'd be interested toward it too.
Well, toward it, it just seemed very empowering, and I think that that's what it was supposed to be at first.
It's meant to be a good thing.
And I think that it had good elements. It
Yeah.
was very inspiring, especially because I was interested in fashion at the time.
Oh, cool.
And Sophia Amoroso, who wrote that book, she started Nasty Gal, and she had an eBay store that she took from, thrifting and vintage, and then made it into this empire, which I still think is incredibly inspiring. But what it turned into, like, because I don't even think she was putting that forward, because if I remember, it's been a while now since I read it, but she very much worked in her own way. And that was what was the most inspiring thing. But what happened was that turned into a larger movement, which eventually evolved into this thing of, women CEOs, which... woman CEO right here. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I am one. But there's a certain energy of that high power woman who isn't in touch with her femininity at all. And it's honestly fairly recent that I've been thinking about this and examining it more, because I've been someone who doesn't want to be as in touch with my femininity in the past. And I guess it's honestly like in the past, well, since getting on YouTube and having more conversations with people, so like the past 3 or 4 years that I've been evolving and growing, getting older, that sort of thing, where I am getting more away from that edgy teen type energy, I'm still in a place where, and I'm going to be in this place forever, I've been this way since I was born, my mom can attest to it, I am not going to be a mother. Like, my maternal does not come out in that way. It's not for me. I don't have a problem with other people doing it, of course, but, for me, that's not it. My maternal energy comes out in art communities. That's where I channel all of that. And when I sort of started thinking about this, it seemed for a very long time it was kind of like this dirty thought in my head of the maternal and the feminine. And when I realized, no, and it comes, there's so much to say here. and it comes along with social media too, where you have these groups of people who are saying, well, you can't be this way because it's weak or something like that. And the girl boss culture does that, where you feel like that feminine thing is weak. And if you say one thing, if you say I have maternal energy, that means, oh, you want to be a mom. And that's not the case. And that's sort of what I've learned just in my reading, in my thinking, in my, listening to other people, is that I can comfortably say I have maternal energy as a woman and still not be a mother, have children. I acknowledge I have that energy and I channel it elsewhere. And I think that for me personally, that's how that, evolution away from your typical online girl boss went in embracing my femininity. And I'm not any different I am different in a better way for doing that, but it doesn't change the things I've chosen in life to embrace that. It makes them more powerful.
Yeah, no, that's so good. That's so good. And I think too that that idea of being able to like include the sense of like being able to discuss the maternal energy in its kind of ontological understanding of being a creator, being an incubator and a creator and a birther of work, of art, of pieces. And it's like, that is absolutely 100% wonderful. And we don't have to like let those certain words kind of get usurped by this side or that side or what they're saying or what this person's saying. And so I think, that's really interesting to hear how that evolution happened for you, but I feel like the girl boss, like the hashtag and everything, it's fascinating because it, again, it wants to do something like so good and so powerful, but it unfortunately, it seems like it can kind of slip into like the hustle culture, like the, just sort of
they definitely converge those two.
Yeah, and it's like, well, also the idea of the whole point is that it's like girl boss. It's the girl word is in there, so we don't want to like just like lose it by saying I'm going to become like the man figure, or like I'm going to. Well, but then you've sacrificed everything you were hoping to elevate. In doing that.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah. So that's really, really, really interesting and really fascinating. And I don't know. I think that it's really great when women can see a kind of a wide array of possibility, like, and we get kind of pigeonholed sometimes by what the mainstream pushes, or what any type of industry will start pushing as what you should be doing. Like, I think this is, and I don't know, maybe it would be like a much larger discussion on like the maternal and where certain ideas might come into for that. But something I was always kind of I look back and it's sort of mystifying to me now. Not mystifying, but it's fascinating to me how little, like in high school, going through the whole like college application process, you know, my school was very geared toward that as in high school. It was probably one of the top high schools in, you know, the country, they would say. So, you know, people were very academically driven and did very well on AP test and, you know, all of that stuff. So when it came to, you know, career charts and stuff like that, I understand the risk of just being like, well, women just have to go and be mothers, right? Like there's a total risk with that, and that's not good. But then there's also the other side of like not even including that into the picture at all, where it's like you may not want to be a mom, but you may want to be a mom, and like there's something about the fact that like that isn't even kind of a it's like here's career.
They shouldn't just be separated because you know you can be a mom and have a powerful creative career as well.
Exactly. Like that's and I don't know if maybe the thought was like, well, yeah, of course, I mean that can just be in the backdrop, but like for example, again, larger conversation, but sometimes people can go to college, get into a bunch of college debt, end up just being like, well, no, I actually want to be married and have kids, and like, but then they've got all this massive debt, and they're feeling the tug of like, well, am I surrendering like all of my you know talents and gifts and talents because I'm not pursuing a career, and I'm sort of like not really going anywhere in the world in the eyes of the world, so or society, to you know, like say be a stay-at-home mom or something like that. So I just think that it's interesting. I don't know, maybe if it's just a pendulum, right? Like some on one time it's like let's really push motherhood biologically and with children, and then it kind of swings in a reactionary direction.
That is what we've been seeing a lot of, I think, in cultural in the culture for sure.
And I think I know for me where I found peace is knowing that I'm a mother and I can be there to raise my kids. However, I have that space to be creative. That's not necessarily the girl bossing. And it's almost like you need that flexibility to move into the creation and then move out of the creation and into the community again. And I always say that women are like water. We have to learn how to be flexible. And actually just one other point, I don't want to like get too much into it because it's a huge discussion.
We have to have another conversation.
I know, I'm like, I can't just throw in like a little thing on careerism at the end there and not even go into it. I feel like
the maternal and these are huge topics.
Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do a disservis to any of these topics because they're so huge. You know, there's so much there.
We'll have follow-ups.
Yay, that'll be lovely.
Yes, next time we visit.
All of our sessions will be girl talk.
The self-help industry in particular, what a lot of women have found is that it is actually geared towards men. This whole wake up at 4 a.m. and get all this done before 8, and we just don't work like that. So I think it's beautiful now that we're realizing that and trying to help each other move into that flexibility.
Yeah, 100%. Well, ladies, we could go on for a long time, so we'll definitely have to do some more sessions, but I really appreciate your time, Sam and Holly. It's been a blessing and such a joy to have you here. I hope we get to...
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. I can't wait to be able to have time together again sometime in the hopefully near future as well. Well, thank you, ladies. Okay, thank you all for listening. Bye.